The Sixers beat the Celtics 116 to 115. Harden 42, 8, and 9.
Hope to win.
John, please keep dropping Harden watch videos because you do it often. You always, whenever he has a bad game, you love to prop up those videos. He answered the call. And before I get into any type of take or analysis I'm going to give, I want to shout out James Harden, the human being, because what he did for the Michigan State shooting survivor victim, John Howe, to be with him through this entire process of recovery, send him out to a game, be there for game 4, give him his autographed sneakers. He even said he's a good luck charm. He's going to be back game 6. That was a special moment. And that speaks to James Harden, the human, who's an exceptional human being. But James Harden, the basketball player. James Harden, the basketball player, John, you're going to learn to respect him because you too quickly want to rule him out. Now, I understand game 2 and game 3, they were bad games. Game 1, top 5-8 performance of these playoffs. Stole one without Joel Embiid. Game 2, game 3 wasn't good, but what did you tell me, John? Great players bounce back. And James Harden bounced back. Not only the floater to send the game into overtime, right? But he had the game-winning 3 in Jaylen Brown's face. That
was a dumbass Jaylen Brown help, by the way, but you know.
It was. And we'll talk about Jaylen Brown because I got a lot to say about him. James Harden this series, and this is the key for the Sixers. The key for the Sixers is getting favorable matchups and switches because that's when James Harden has been his best in the series. Shout out to Mark CNBA who did he hand-tracked all this from all 4 games. Harden versus deep drop, 1.02 points per possession. Harden versus high drop, 0.6 points per possession, not good. And for those watching as a reference, 1 point per possession is a great efficiency. Harden versus switches, 1.56 points per possession. And the guys he's usually switching on to have been Al Horford and Malcolm Brogdon, and he's been torching them. I think next game, Jaylen Brown is going to fight around the screens more often to stay on to James Harden. I think that's going to be the adjustment the Boston Celtics make. But I want to give James Harden his flowers. And Joel Embiid had an exceptional game. He's had 2 straight great games in a row.
Not Horford.
James Harden, everybody talks about how he's this playoff choker. And while he does have his bad moments in the playoffs, we're talking about a guy who's top 10 all-time in 40-point playoff games. Top 10. That means only 9 other players in NBA history have more 40-point games than this man in the NBA playoffs. He has 47 30-point games in the playoffs. James Harden, it was a stretch where he was great in the playoffs. It's not his fault he ran into Golden State, a dynasty, at the very peak, with Kevin Durant at the peak of his powers. It's not his fault. He was on his way to winning the championship with Brooklyn until he ripped up his hamstring. Grade 2 hamstring, still played through it. James Harden, if he can continue to play like this, the 76ers have a chance. But the thing that they have to focus on is that they have to get Harden in these favorable matchups on switches. That's going to be the key to this series. And the players got to keep hitting their shots. At home, Philadelphia, the role players haven't hitting their shots. And Joel Embiid, he's looking healthier. Every single game, he's ramping it up. I understand the 4th quarter versus Al Horford was not good, but that's when a player like PJ Tucker, having him on your team is so impactful. The leadership quality he brings, telling Joel Embiid, listen, you got to lock in and you got to do what you got to do. PJ Tucker is so valuable for this team, and he was a big reason why the Sixers won this game too. His offensive rebound late, getting an and 1. The Sixers are legit, man, and I think this series could go 7.
Hold on. Joel, if I have to hear this sad-ass boo story about James Harden
it's facts.
One more time. I've heard this story 300 times in 3 years.
It's not boo-boo, it's facts.
Stop telling this story about the Rockets and the Warriors. Please, bro.
Why would you not want to talk about it? PJ Tucker's been the difference
the
maker.
Warriors
everywhere he's went.
The Warriors had a super team. They had the best team assembled in NBA history. And Harden's Rockets were the only teams to take the 6 and the 7 games outside of the Clippers in the first round. But we know that was a fluke. The Rockets were their best opponent. And it took Chris Paul getting injured in game 5 for the Warriors to even beat the Rockets.
Why do you give him so much flack for losing? They lost.
It wasn't his fault. He had 30.
He was a part of the 27 mysteries.
Bro, Trevor Ariza, dead ass went.
He was getting fouled left and right. Scott Foster masterclass for the Warriors. Happened multiple times.
Look, a lot of things are stacked up against Harden in those years, and I think for his peak, he's criminally underappreciated for that. But look, for Philadelphia, I do want to touch on PJ Tucker getting that and one, the offensive rebound, and then in between giving Joel Embiid a pep talk. That is very key for this Philly team. Because in the years past, they have not had anywhere near that leader that's going to hold them accountable in the most thick stretches and the most tense moments. And I think PJ Tucker in game 3, he went 3 of 4 from three-point range, finally taking the wide open threes the Celtics will see to him continually. That's a very big difference from last year. I think that can play, even if he's not going to do it in the box score, that can be a difference maker for them. And then it's going to win a series at some point, whether it's this year or next. To speak on James Harden, you know, Joel, you brought up a great point before that on switches against these Celtics bigs particularly, and Malcolm Brogdon, who has not done a great job, he's had a lot of success. And I do want to give him some credit because coming off his soft tissue hamstring injuries at 34, you can't expect any player to have that burst. And it's really gone. But he's been able to get downhill, evolving his game with the mid-range. You know, look at his years in Houston. He was not taking any catch and shoot threes. He got to Brooklyn. He's playing off of 2 All-Stars, 2 All-NBA players, and KD and Kyrie. If he got the ball kicked out to him, he would just dribble it out, and he would never take a catch-and-shoot look. But in Philadelphia, he has embraced that, and so he deserves the credit for evolving his game, especially for mid-range, where that's been a huge focal point. He's able to get inside of guys. He's lower body. He's a strong guy. He's got the grown man strength for sure, and that's been a huge part of his game as well. But this was a legacy-saving game for him in many ways. If he loses this game, the Sixers are going down 3-1. We're talking about Doc Rivers getting fired. We're talking about Joel Embiid maybe get traded. And we're talking about him playing maybe his most important and last meaningful playoff game, if that were the case. By the end of the game in the fourth quarter, he hits another dagger on a floater to send it to overtime. And that for me is like, you know what? There's just some supernatural force in the building. Shout out to John. That to me was a really awesome moment. It just feels like the stars in that game, at least, were aligning for James Harden to push it to 2-2. But now on Boston side of things, I've been very up and down with them this postseason, as they are as a team generally. And I'm just pretty worried about them as a whole. Like a great example of this is at the end of the game, you have 17 seconds. We're at the 5-second marker. You're down by 1 point, and Jason Tatum's just dribbling out the logo like there's 25 seconds more to go. I'm thinking to myself, my guy, do you think with 5 seconds left, you're going to have any chance to get an offensive rebound if you miss? Do you think you have any chance of getting some good look? But because by the time you get to the paint, there's going to be 1 second left on the shot clock. I don't trust Jason Tatum as number 1 on a championship team. And we've seen this year in and year out. I mean, he's been a great rebounder. Defensively, he's making plays. He bounced back from a terrible first half, but it's just very frustrating to watch him late in games where he has the crazy great clutch stat numbers where he's 50% from the field. DEHLS was pointing that out in a recent episode, but I don't think he is that alpha. I never have. I don't know if he ever will. River talking about this as well. It's kind of like Paul George, where PG was early on in his career. Jason Tatum took LeBron to Game 7 in his rookie season, but there's just a lack of poise in the biggest moments as a playmaker. And that was a great example of that late in the game. Jaylen Brown, to me, is the most consistent 3-level scorer on this team. Now, Tatum is the best player because of his rebounding, his defensive versatility, and he's a better playmaker too. But honestly, I don't think you should be going down to Jason Tatum in the last couple of seconds, last minute. I think Jaylen Brown's the one who needs to take the last shot for the Celtics team.
Oh, now that one's tough. And I'm going to tell you why that one's tough. Because as much as Jaylen Brown is a great scorer, and nobody's denying that he's a great scorer, great 3-level scorer, he still struggles with his decision-making. And I think in those shots, like you look at guys like LeBron, you look at guys like Steph, like even KD struggles with this sometimes. Those late in the game, late in stretches, you need a guy who can not only score, but who can make plays for others, make smart decisions. And sometimes you put a guy in double teams, you put a guy in a pick and roll, pick the screener hedges, They could throw a turnover. You know, we've seen Embiid. You double him, he throws a turnover. Jaylen Brown's not a really good passer. Sometimes he loses the ball. Tatum, he just makes a bad decision. And I think that play was more of, you have a lot of time. Missoula also has a couple timeouts. You're dribbling down the clock, and I personally, you have Tobias Harris on you. Take him one-on-one. You know, this end of the game, take him one-on-one. You call for a double screen. Like, it just looked like they had nothing planned for that. Like, you let your team go. Nobody had nothing planned. Nobody made the initiative to say, all right, call a timeout. We don't have nothing planned. Nobody made the initiative to say, well, let's run something. It was just a lot of, we don't know what we're going to do. Our heads are off our heads. Like, it was just a lot of nonsense. I think the lack of consistency between both Tatum in terms of his decision-making on offense, just in general, and then Brown in terms of his decision-making as a playmaker, creates a void between the two. I don't think Brown can be an alpha. I think Tatum is too good to be a beta. And I think that's where the thing kind of hinders. Like, Tatum is a really, really great player. I think Tatum as a scorer is really great. But his lack of mid-range game, I think, is a real problem. You know, I think that's the moment where you kind of look at it like, all right, well, this guy's not a real three-level scorer. We've seen Devin Booker get in his spot, you know, one-on-one. You send a double, he's making a pass. If you don't send the double, he can make a quick play, get a bucket, boom. And that's the problem. But I think overall, this defense, you know, end of the game, you had a switch with Jason Tatum. If Embiid makes the shot, it's a tie game. Why Jaylen Brown? You've never been a great off-ball defender, but why would you help? You're up by 2. It doesn't make sense. You leave James Harden open. Like you said, the stars were aligned. James Harden makes that big shot, was fire shot. You know, he was great all game. Legacy game, he needed this one. You know, he had the one in game 1. He kind of stunk it up 2 and 3. He needed this one. This is the problem, though, and I think this is the problem with Philly. You can't have those stinkers in between. For them to beat Boston, Embiid and Harden have to be on their A game. Same with the role players too, but those two specifically have to be on their A game. You need the role players also to step up, but you can't afford to have those type of stinkers from those two. And I think you can see the potential in this team when both those guys play amazing. They look like one of the best teams in the East and a team that can legitimately beat Boston because they have that mismatch with Harden who can take advantage of the bigs, take advantage of Brogdon. You have Embiid who creates so much gravity when he has the ball. You have to throw doubles. You have to kind of do what Brown did, which led to the James Harden 3-ball. I think, you know, defensively, what Boston needs to do is stop with the switches. Jaylen Brown, he's strong enough. He's 6'7". He needs to fight over more, stop letting Al Horford get off on the switches. But let's just be honest. Jaylen Brown's never been that type of defender. You know, he's great all ball. He's great in one-on-one situations, but he's never been a great screen navigator. He's never been great off ball. Like this whole assumption of him being a great overall defender and a two-way defender has never been a fact. So the assumption that he's going to do that when he's never done it is odd. But I do think Harden does, and I'm not a Harden fan, but Harden gets his flowers because he put on a legacy game and they needed it. And that performance was extremely amazing.
I think the Sixers, of course, it's not ideal if Harden plays bad. But game 3, Harden played bad, and the Sixers could have won.
Yeah.
The reason why they didn't win was because it wasn't just Harden. It was Maxey. It was Tobias. It was Melton. It was everybody else also played terrible along with him.